Shalom, my name is Adam Wasser from Brooklyn, New York. On the idea of can Israel become a religious Jewish state? Today there are 6 million Jews in Israel. 20% of them are religious. Out of the 13 million Jews that live in the world today, only 20% of them are religious. So how could we make a religious state with a majority of a secular population? When we look at Jewish history, when we look at whether the Bible, the Torah, or modern times with the Second Intifada, we find that every time there's persecution for the Jewish people, every time that something goes wrong that's really hurting the Jewish people turn to one another, and they also turn to God. During the Second Intifada that was around September 11th, a lot of Jews were getting into spirituality. A lot of Jews were going to spot and finding where's their connection, what's their Jewish identity. Today, there's a big question, there's a big valve in the idea of what is Jewish identity? What does it mean to be a Jew in a Jewish state? Now, for hypothetical purposes, I'm going to say, how do we make a Jewish state? It's going to take a war. It's going to take something tragic to make that happen, because you're going to need people to really open themselves up and look at the larger picture and not just what's going on in their everyday life, but to look at their future. So for hypothetical purposes, let's say there is a war in Israel, and we have a leader that comes about and he says, okay, after this war, it's over, we rebuild the Beis Hamikdash, we build the temple in Jerusalem. And he builds the temple in Jerusalem, and while he's building it, he says, all right, we need to rebuild the Sanhedrin. We need to put the Jewish Supreme Court of Israel back in place. Now, if he were to do this, it would be very complicated, because you're going to have a large segment of the Jewish population that is not religious, and you're going to have another large segment that is going to Baal Tshuva, to becoming religious, and then you're going to have religious Jews that are going to disagree with the changing and the evolving of the whole situation. So you're going to have a very strong leader that's going to have to bring the people together and say, all right, let's have a Sanhedrin. How do we make it work? In my idea, and you got to understand, I think a lot about this. For years, I've been trying to put this together, and for years, I've been trying to figure out how this would work, and I'm still working on it. But for me, in where I'm standing right now and how I personally would put this together, I see it as that you need to bring leaders together, leaders from all denominations of Judaism, and say, all right, how do we make this work? Okay, we have a law in Torah and the 613 laws that says you can't light fire on Shabbat. So that means nobody can drive on Shabbat, because when you turn on a car, it lights fire. So how do we can't stop people from driving on Shabbat, because this is democracy. This is a democratized, westernized country. How do we do it? So you need to have injunctions. You need to have an understanding, a Bill of Rights, where the Constitution is the 613 laws of the Torah. But the Knesset cannot go against the 613 laws, so maybe it should be a situation where when it's a thing of driving cars on Shabbat, it goes to the people, and the people vote and say yes or no. And if they say yes, then the Knesset backs off, and they say, all right, we allow driving on Shabbat, because that's what the people say. This way they're not going against the Torah. Now you're going to say, well, that's iffy, that's tricky. But here's the thing. In the Torah, when you look at it, there's a lot of loopholes. There's a lot of things of maneuvering around situations. The Rashi, his rabbi, Rashi was a famous, beautiful rabbi. His rabbi, great rabbi, he saw that a lot of women were being abused in the Middle Ages by their husbands, because they were, in those days, they could have more than one wife. And he saw that a second wife, third wife, whatever, was being abused, it was neglected, whatever it was, and he brought rabbis together and made an injunction that said that for the next 500 years, a Jewish man could not marry more than one wife. And recently, a few years ago, rabbis got together and they re-evolved this law that for another 500 years, Jewish men could only marry one wife. It's only except by Ashkenazi, Northern European Jews, mind you. But it shows that you can put injunctions on the law. For example, homosexuality. If we had a Jewish state, you have a lot of homosexual people, Jewish people in Israel. You can't just go and say in a democracy you don't have the right to be gay. In the Torah it says a man cannot lie with a man the way he lies with a woman. You can interpret that, but it's going to be very hard to interpret it anyway, not to get into it. You have to have an injunction and say, all right, for now we allow homosexuality in Israel, and you put an injunction upon it that says it's okay. Because, okay, if you're very extreme, if you're very religious, you're going to say, oh my gosh, how can you accept that? You have to think about other people. You have to think about you yourself are a Jew, but you have another 13 million family members around the world that you need to work with. You cannot have a Jewish state that's religious, that's only for you. You have to be compromisable. You have to be understanding. If a religious state is going to work in Israel, everyone has to compromise and everyone has to make exceptions. It's better than nothing, so don't complain. Anyways, these injunctions, a Bill of Rights, on top of the 613 laws, which allow the society to decide what direction they want to take while allowing the Torah to be the Constitution of Israel, I believe can work. I think we can give it a try. You know, we have to give the idea that we as a Jewish society with many opinions and many variety, you know, I feel sorry for an Israeli politician because he has to deal with so many people that are unsatisfied. You know, trying to satisfy a Jewish population is not easy. And it's going to be hard. But you can bring about a religious society in Israel if you do it in the right way of slowly, slowly, bringing things about, but in a way that is practical and realistic to the individual. Building the Beis Hamikdash and bringing it into being is so much of an idea of love of Israel and love of God, but it's a lot of what's the word, nationalism of people will feel that pride of who they are and where they come from. There will be a lot of pride involved, and you have to work with that pride, and you have to make it evolve into not pushing people away, but coercing them into the idea of why something is right. It's a beautiful idea, but it is very controversial. It's very difficult, and I believe it can work, and it should work. But we need the right leadership in order to do that. Now, some people will say you need Mashiach to make this happen. Okay, I have no problem with that. En baya. But I think when we learn Torah, we learn don't wait for God to do something for you. You need to make it happen, and God will work with you. I don't know where in Torah it says that you should wait for God to make it happen. It's anti-Jewish to think that you should wait for God to make something happen. So we should make the Beis Hamikdash be rebuilt, and we should bring the Sanhedrin back. And when God is ready, when we are acceptable to make Mashiach happen, then Mashiach will happen. But we can't just wait. We can't just say, all right, we're going to wait for God. That's anti-Jewish. Anyways, a bit more in detail into bringing a Jewish religious state about. There needs to be the understanding that each community in Israel has the right to cut off their community. In Mei Sharim, in Jerusalem, there are streets that the government says, you know, they have to allow to be open on Shabbat. And the people they're very ultra-religious, Hasidim, they say, no, the street cannot be open. We need to say, you know, you have the right to close your street if you want. You want your street to be open, that's your business. You want your street to be closed, that's your business. It has to be a community. If the community votes that they want their streets closed on Shabbat, they must be closed. If the community votes that they want their streets open on Shabbat, the streets are open. Where's the democracy in forcing people to have their streets open? We need to have a change in this. It's not right. Anyways, God bless you all, and Listen, ultimately, we are all one people. We are all one family. Whether you're religious, secular, whatever you are, black, white, whatever. If you're Jewish, you're in the family. And that's what's most important. And we can work together and we can make it happen as one family. God bless and take care.